Chapter 51 The Plan. Jeff hung up the phone with a grin on his face. "What are we doing, Jeff?" Jack yelled across the room playfully, aiming for annoying, but too genuinely excited to pull it off. "In about 2 minutes, Lindsay's gonna tell us. She, Matt, and Traco are on their way here now. We're gonna meet them in the garage," Jeff announced. Michael looked skeptical. Okay. Why the garage?" "You'll see," Jeff said, still grinning. "The whole area's in lockdown. Do they have some kind of cover?" Jeremy asked. Jeff just grinned and repeated with a giggle, "You'll see." Ryan looked at Jeremy with a raised eyebrow, and they both shook their heads. Jeff seemed so very pleased with himself, so he was definitely up to something. They all headed toward the elevator to the garage, Jack picking up the final box of prepared Molotovs to take down on the way. "So," Jeff started, "the plan for us is to get inside the FIB building to gain access to their servers, wipe the data, and blow the joint, which is no small task on its own, but they're expecting something, so it's going to be even harder. We're going to use every trick in the book, starting with an old favorite, misdirection. We're going to start a riot." Michael grinned. "I like that plan." Ryan only just noticed the t-shirt he was wearing said riot. Apt. "Technically, Cowchop's going to be leading that leg," Jeff pointed out. "How'd you manage to talk them into that?" Jack asked. Jeff laughed. "They're complete lunatics. I doubt I could have talked them out of it." The lift arrived at the garage level, and Jack put the box with the others, lined up neatly against one wall, ready to be distributed tomorrow. The others spilled into the open area, and with impeccable timing, the mechanics of the door engaged, and the roar of a truck engine echoed through the space. The LSFD fire truck only barely cleared the entrance. The engine cut out, and Trevor, Matt, and Lindsay climbed out of the cab, the others staring in quiet awe at the acquisition. Trevor gestured to the truck. "So here's the plan." "Hate to break it to you, Trevor, but that's a fire truck," Jeremy deadpanned, earning a chuckle from Ryan. Gavin's eyes lit up. "That's the best bloody plan I've ever seen." Lindsay pulled a large box full of stiff-looking yellow fabric from the cab. "Your uniforms. This is how we get around inside the perimeter. Emergency services have free roam, especially if there's an actual emergency, so we'll be incognito." "This is brilliant!" Gavin was ecstatic. "Of course Gavin likes it," Michael rolled his eyes, "but I gotta admit, it's a pretty fucking great plan." "Still doesn't help us get in the building," Ryan pointed out. "That's where the actual emergency comes in." Lindsay handed the box over to Michael and climbed back into the cab of the truck to get something else. "Yeah," Jeff continued, "there are a few more steps to the plan, but now that you all know about the thing with Bernie, I can properly explain that." The relief in Jeff's voice was audible, and Ryan suddenly realized how much that secret must have been weighing on him, especially since they had made the connection between how the randoms were being used by the FIB. He still couldn't find it in himself to be angry with Jeff. If any of them had known about the ties with Bernie, it could have placed them all at risk. Carrying a secret like that would have meant none of them could leave the crew alive. Jeff's paranoia, the ugly kind that reared its head all those months ago, when he thought Ryan and Jeremy were traitors, now seemed a lot more justified. Besides, the knowledge that they may have been acting in the service of some greater good actually carried with it its own sense of relief. They were still not the good guys. They never would be. But maybe they weren't quite the villains they had cast themselves as. Maybe there really was room for a redemption arc in their story after all. Lindsay emerged from the cab with almost a dozen pizza boxes, with "Pizza This, Get Stuffed" printed on the lids. Matt took half the boxes from her, and Jeremy quickly offered to take the rest, peeking under the lid of the topmost box and getting a face full of cheesy-smelling steam. "Are these from the Mission Row place?" he asked. Matt nodded. "It's not as good as the one in Vinewood, but..." He shrugged. "Hey, pizza's a pizza," Ryan said, edging closer to the boxes Jeremy was carrying. Jeremy looked insulted. "A pizza is not just a pizza, Ryan." "He's right," Michael backed him up. "One day I'll show you what a really good pizza is, and then you'll understand." "That sounds like good incentive not to get ourselves killed tomorrow, then," Ryan said, swiping a piece of pizza from Jeremy's stack before he could stop him and shoving it into his mouth. After the weeks of healthy eating that the cult of Peak had put them through, the pizza would have tasted delicious regardless of where it came from. He couldn't suppress a moan of pleasure as the taste filled his mouth. Gavin stifled a laugh. I love that that's a valid reason for you not to get killed, Ryan. It's as good as any, he muttered back through a mouthful of pizza before adding, and better than some. Jeff followed Lindsay to the lift to head back up to the penthouse, the others looking around confused as Jeff held the door. You assholes coming? Wait, that's it? You dragged us all down here just for that? Jack asked with a scowl. Jeff grinned dopily. Yeah, it was a hell of an entrance, though, right? There was a collective sigh as they all got back in the elevator to head up to the penthouse. The pizza smelled great, though. So, like I was saying, Jeff continued in the lift, this actual emergency? Bernie had one of his guys plant a device on the 49th floor of the FIB building that we now have remote access to. And if a bomb goes off in the FIB building, it's only natural that the LSFD should respond to help evacuate the building, right? The elevator arrived back at the penthouse with a cheery ding. I'm gonna give it to you, Jeff. This is a pretty solid plan, Ryan confessed, finishing the slice of pizza and trying to snatch another one from the box while Jeremy kept moving it just out of reach. Jeff grinned proudly. They spread out the pizza boxes on the kitchen counter, grabbed plates, drinks, and paper towels. Steffi always knew to make sure they were well stocked with paper towels, and spread themselves comfortably around the expansive living space of the penthouse. So the bomb goes off, and we make sure we're the first ones on the scene, Jeff explained, pausing to take a bite of pizza. Gavin had been looking over the layout of the FIB building earlier and suddenly perked up. Wait, you said the bomb was on the 49th floor. The servers are on the 53rd. And if we want to wipe the slate, we're going to need access to them first. Jeff nodded, swallowing the pizza he was chewing and cutting him off. That's why we're splitting up. Ground team, that's you four. He gestured to Michael, Gavin, Jeremy, and Ryan. Head in as firemen. Jack and I will be heading over from the roof and working our way down to secure the server room before you guys reach it. After the bomb goes off, everyone inside should be making their way down and out, so there shouldn't be much to deal with in the way of resistance. We clear the room, get into the servers, and wipe the data. Michael rigs the explosives, and we get out of there before we blow it. We go late afternoon. We'll be running a slip line from the west, so the setting sun will give us some cover on our approach to the roof. He nodded with a grin to Jeremy, who had inadvertently inspired the idea from his own sniping tactics. That sounds a lot easier than climbing all those stairs, Matt commented. Why don't you all just go over that way? I don't like to put all my eggs in one basket, Jeff replied. Besides, we need a reliable exit strategy. I want everyone to have a parachute as well in case things go tits up, especially since we're rigging explosives in the building. Bernie assures me his guy made sure the building would be structurally sound enough for us to go up there, but there's no guarantee that it'll stay that way once we blow the room with the servers. You guys want to be at least at level 50 to pull off that jump if you do have to, though, Trevor noted matter-of-factly. Any lower and it gets too risky. Plus, you'll be really visible. Pretty easy to get shot out of the sky. That's just what I wanted to hear. Thanks, Trevor, Jeremy added sarcastically. Jeremy wasn't the best with heights, and base jumping from an exploding building surrounded by riot control and FIB agents on high alert didn't sound like the most appealing idea to him either. Well, that's why that's the backup plan, Jeff explained, and why I need most of you to be coming in as firemen. Firemen are expected to be escorting people out of the building. It'll be a clear getaway back to the penthouse to regroup before all hell breaks loose. There was a pause as everyone took it in, most mouths still crammed with food. Then what? Jack asked finally. Jeff swallowed another mouthful of pizza. He'd barely finished the slice and took a sip of his Diet Coke before he explained. We need to make sure they don't regain control. Once the servers come down, they'll be vulnerable. That's the signal to step it up. Kinda Funny's gonna be working on interrupting their communications and calling weak points and riot control for the others, directing the flow and working the crowds. The attack boys will be on the ground supporting Funhouse and the rest of our crew to strategically hit the big targets, working their way up the chain of command to Jason Dowell. We know he's planning on sticking it out. We don't stop until he's dead. Caltrops arming the masses and leading the riots. They claimed they were immune to pepper spray. They wanted to test that theory. Crazy bastards. The IAA will step in once they realize the FIB can't handle it. That's when we can pull our guys out of there and let things die down on their own. How long will that be? Jack asked, a worried expression forming on his face at the thought of so many of them in direct combat. We just gotta keep at it until the IAA takes over. Gus will give us the heads up. But how long? Jack repeated. I don't know, Jeff admitted dejectedly. The words hung in the air. It was as if Jeff was just waiting for them to come to their senses and abandon him. It was a feeling Ryan knew all too well, a feeling he knew Jeff didn't need or deserve right now. As long as it takes, Ryan spoke up, until we win. Michael, Jeremy, and Gavin nodded instantly. The others slowly joined in. Relief washed over him in much the same way it seemed to do to Jeff. They were all still in this together. Fakes for life. They spent the rest of the evening discussing minor details of the plan, talking shit, telling jokes and stories, and finally falling victim to Gavin's rhetorical questioning before people started falling away to attempt to get some proper sleep before the big day. Michael and Lindsay were the first to head to bed, likely for reasons other than sleeping, followed by Matt, Trevor, Mika, and Andy in a flurry to not be the last one in their room, who would be most likely to end up sleeping on the floor. Gavin and Jeremy tired next, Gavin continuing his onslaught of questions as they trailed off to the bedroom. Jeremy, if you had to choose one of us to be stuck on a desert island with, who would it be? Jeremy's answer faded down the hallway after them, but Ryan smiled to hear it. Jack yawned and stretched out, looking about to drop off himself. You're sure you're okay on the couch, Ryan? You can have the room if you'd prefer. I'm okay out here. I'm gonna be up a while longer anyway. As long as you're sure, I'm fine, Jack, but thanks. Jack sighed, getting up and yawning again. Well, if that's the case, I'm gonna hit the hay. Ryan gave him a nod. Night, Jack. Jeff rubbed his face with both hands. I'm not far behind you. Just gonna finish my drink. It was mostly melted ice, and Jeff swirled the paltry remainder of his glass a little pathetically. Ryan knew instantly he wanted to talk to him privately. Jack seemed to take the hint and went to bed. Ryan stared out the window, eye drawn to the illuminated letters of the Vinewood sign in the distance, the ever-present reminder of the city's illustrious facade, the glamorous face that masked the underbelly of sin and corruption that they were far more familiar with. Jeff seemed to follow his gaze, but he had that look that suggested he wasn't really seeing, lost deep in thought. Do you think it's doable? Jeff asked sincerely, looking for a direct, honest answer. The plan? It's not going to be easy, but yeah, I think it's doable, Ryan replied, as long as we've got enough time to wipe the servers and rig charges. Should only need a few minutes, if everything works out. People will have evacuated from the upper levels by the time we get up there. If they're suspicious, though, and my money's on they will be, they might be less inclined to leave. We're going to need to be careful and make sure we're prepared if they call it as a trick. You think the FIB would leave agents in the upper levels of a burning building? You think they wouldn't? This is the same FIB that endorses waterboarding as a valid interrogation technique, Jeff. He smirked, but it was predictably humorless, and Jeff returned a look of pity that made him uncomfortable. They don't play by the rules, is what I'm getting at. But then, these days, it seems few do. There was a bitter note in his voice. It wasn't directed at Jeff, but it probably felt that way. Once that's all done, it's just a matter of bringing some extra firepower into the streets and showing them what we're capable of. Sending a message. It's dangerous, but that we can do. Jeff flinched, picking up on the tone of his voice. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about Bernie's involvement sooner. I wanted to, but I kept thinking about what might happen to you if you left. What might have happened to Ray, or any of you if you wanted to leave, if you knew, or if anyone thought you knew anything. Ryan understood. That had already occurred to him. He wanted to cut him off, to tell him that he understood it was okay. Save him the embarrassment. He needs to say this. Let him say it. This is for him. Jeff ran his fingers through his hair, scrunching it in fistfuls. There were times when I let it get the better of me, when keeping my secrets became more important than protecting the crew, and you got the raw end of that deal every time. And for that, I really am sorry. Ryan hadn't thought about it like that before, but he was right. Every time there was suspicion in the crew, it had been his neck on the chopping block. Even when it wasn't directly, his going to the defense of Jeremy had the same effect. And yet he'd been the first to put his own life on the line to save them. Jeff sighed. Look, Ryan, I know you give a shit about this crew. You've said it yourself, the reason you left, of all the reasons you could have left, you left because you wanted to save us from yourself. Ryan gave the briefest of nods. It was for them. It was how it was always going to be. Hey, Ryan, be honest with me here? Jeff's voice cracked slightly. That day on the roof, what would have... If I hadn't been there... Ryan sensed his discomfort in where the question was going. He closed his eyes and shook his head, chewing his lip a little as the realization hit him as well. The guilt that had eaten at him then probably wasn't all that different to what Jeff was going through, or at least had gone through. Be honest. You both deserve that. He couldn't bring his eyes to meet Jeff's, looking out the window again. Well, let's just say we wouldn't be having this conversation now. Jeff winced as if it physically hurt him to hear it. Jesus, Ryan. I'm so sorry. Shit. Look, if it's any consolation, Ryan said stoically, recollecting himself. Things are different now. I'm not going to do that again. Jeff winced again. I'm sorry. Don't be, Ryan said firmly. You don't have to. You did the right thing. His gaze drifted back out the window. It was remarkable that anyone would go to war over this city, but it was home. It was the only place that had ever felt like home. And he had his suspicions that didn't have anything to do with the city. What you did today, telling us, that took guts, Jeff. Jeff huffed a laugh. The look on his face agreed with Ryan. You didn't really think any of us would walk, though. Ryan looked at him quizzically. I didn't know, Jeff confessed. I didn't know what to think. You'd walked before. Lil Jay, Michael, and Gavin. You should have seen how badly that shook them up. I just wanted to give you the choice. I needed to know that you knew what you were getting into, and why. A grin tugged at the corner of Ryan's lips. Well, you don't have to worry about me going anywhere. You're stuck with all of us. Thank you. That actually means a lot. You've done a lot for this crew, Ryan. I know you all have, but... Jeff sounded like he was struggling to find the words. We couldn't do it without you. Ryan cringed, the last nagging doubts resurfacing. But I still fucked up. I hurt Jeremy. I nearly killed you. As if deliberately ignoring him, Jeff drained the remainder of his glass, stretched, and stood up, stalking to the kitchen to rinse his glass. Ryan, I know you do whatever you think is right for the crew. I don't doubt it for a second. Ryan just listened, accepting the words and all the brutal honesty he uttered them. He wasn't wrong. Which is why I want you to lead the lads on this one. They listen to you. They respect you. You've all got each other's backs. You've proven that over and over. It's not an easy job, not by any stretch of the imagination, but you've got this. And I know I've been an asshole in the past, but I trust you. Are you up for it? Ryan's expression softened. It was a strange dichotomy. He'd been given more responsibility, more pressure. The task ahead of them was daunting, but Jeff's faith in him gave him strength. Yes. Jeff smiled and nodded. Okay then. You should get some sleep. We're gonna need it. We have a revolution to start tomorrow.